So first of all, I want to thank you for choosing this session. Today, we are here to talk about the concept of human connection. Specifically, how do we deepen human connection in this increasingly digital world we live in, where more and more is done on mobile payment and less is done in a branch? How do we keep and maintain or build connections with customers we may never see? So we're going to dive deep into that subject today. But before we do, I want to start with a little story. So about a month ago, as I was preparing, probably a little bit more than that, because I had to send the slides in about a month ago, I got a call and an email from my friend Tom. Tom has an elderly mom, like 92 or something like that. She lives near Cleveland. Now, Tom's mom is really active, and she lives on her own. She's independent. She drives everywhere on her own. And she took a trip to the bank that day in her local town to solve some kind of banking issue. I don't even know what the specifics were. But it became evident early on that something had gone very, very wrong in this interaction that she had with her banker. Because before long, as this banker was trying to explain the arduous processes and confusing amounts of paperwork and online screens that she needed to fill out, that this woman was in tears. She was embarrassed and frustrated, and all of this from her banker. So my friend Tom calls me and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" So it got me thinking about, are we placing the customer at the center of everything we do? Are we giving some thought to how Tom's mom felt that day when she was not being heard and listened to and understood? Because today, again, as I mentioned, with increasing amounts of our transactions going to digital devices and fewer people coming into the branch, the relationship that financial institutions have with their consumers has never been more at risk. And here's what I came to, that human connection is the single most and most important way for you to differentiate your financial institution. Let me repeat that. Human connection is the single most important way for you to differentiate your financial institution. And we're going to talk about why that's important and how you do it. Now, how many of you are on Facebook? Of course, the majority of us are on Facebook, and we might be one of the 85 million people that said no after Cambridge Analytica and all that. But for better or for worse, Facebook and social media platforms like this are, of course, here to stay. And they're making our lives better. They're allowing us to connect to people in different parts of the world and talk to high school classmates and a variety of things. And we connect with each other. But here's the paradox of all of it. The average Facebook user has 155 friends, yet we have never felt more alone and more isolated than ever before. So yes, we want to develop a deeper relationship and connection with everyone that's in our life, but we have to recognize that as we expand the digital channels, we have to keep an eye on the human element. So I want you, as we go through the next 40 minutes or so, I want you to think about Tom's mom. This elderly woman who was really proud of herself for being independent, who went into her local branch and was not heard or listened to, and what effect that had on her, because I'm sure we all have someone in our life with that. Now, Dr. Brene Brown from the University of Houston, she said it like this: we are neurobiologically pre-wired for human connection. And I say that how we are connecting is evolving. So we are still connecting, it's just happening in different ways. Consider this, that in the UK in January, they appointed a new cabinet position called a Minister of Loneliness, because they took a look at the statistics of the elderly population in the country, and they realized that a large chunk of them, the elderly, spent more than an entire week without having human contact with another individual. So we've got a problem here. We're in some ways, again, a crisis of loneliness, a crisis of isolation, and a recent New York Times article had said this is causing a problem. When in fact, recent surveys said that 53% of people, when surveyed, said that they have no one outside of their core family to discuss an important business issue or personal issue with. So we are becoming increasingly isolated. And that 53% is up 17% since the beginning of the internet. So we are becoming more isolated. So I want you to think about all these things, because as we continue to grow our credit union and grow our bank, we've got to figure out the human connection angle of this. So how many of you are marketers in the room? I'm guessing the majority of you wouldn't be here, right? So I want you to ask yourself, to what extent are we thinking about the human connection when we are putting out a campaign or how we're reaching out to customers? Is human connection even considered when we look at our business processes and how we open up an account online, and how easy or difficult is it for someone to pay using our mobile app, or whatever the case may be? So I want to put this thought in your head that human connection and the empathy that we can show toward another human being is going to be critical for the forward-looking success of your institution. Now, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics has done some surveys and statistics over the last 10 years. And what they see is that, pretty much from 27 to 2015 and 17 and so forth, that we, for the most part, unless you have kids at home, you sleep about a third of that 24-hour period. And then we spend another portion of it with work and getting to and from work and commute, depending on where you live. And another portion with survival, cooking and eating and so forth. But then the personal time, what's happening with personal time? Personal time here is increasingly being spent in front of a computer screen. And you might say, wow, that's a real problem. What are we going to do about that? We have to stop that. And I would say, it's not necessarily a problem. Human connection is still going on. It's just happening in a different way. So are we creating avenues to connect with our customers or potential customers whom we may never ever see across a desk from each other? Psychologist Adam Alder, in his recent TED Talk, talked about this very thing, and he said, what's going on during that screen time? Are people connecting with each other? Are they having a good time? Are they sharing emotional content? Are they really connecting? So you might say, I think I've got my marketing figured out. I want to add a whole new layer to it that said, how does your customer think and how does your customer feel? So how do we do this? How do we deepen human connections? I'm going to talk to you about my 3 tenets, 3 things that you can do regardless of size, regardless of geography, that you can do to deepen the connection with your customers or people in general. Number 1, have a clear purpose. We will take each of these and I'll break them down and give you examples and give you some things to think about. But at the end of our 45-minute period together, I'm going to call the action to you and say, what are you going to do? So the first tenet is have a clear purpose. Know why you're in business and know what difference that you are trying to make in the world. And your world might be the county that you do business in. Number 2, cultivate empathy. Not sympathy, not feeling sorry for someone, but empathy. And what does it feel like to be in that person's shoes? And third, rethink what face-to-face means. Are we creating avenues to connect with our customers that maybe have nothing to do with our branch, but yet still require face-to-face? This conference is a perfect example. Think about it. This is a conference very geared toward digital and AI and Jim Baruch's robot and all the other things that we have seen. But yet there are 1,750 of us at this conference. Why? Because we want to be with each other. We want to learn from each other. We want to inspire each other. We want to challenge each other. And that part never is going to change. But how we do that and how we give that gift to customers might. So I want you to think about these 3 tenets: purpose, empathy, and rethinking face-to-face. Here we go. Number 1, having a clear purpose. Some of you in this room have heard me speak on a whole topic on purpose. But what we do know about purpose-driven companies is that when they have a clear purpose, a clear reason for being in business, it helps the customer find you. And it also helps the employees find you because you're doing something that's bigger than you, and that draws people to you. You have a cause, you have a purpose, you have a reason for being. So let's unpack that a little bit. The most important and powerful and enduring purposes are human-centered. We need to continue to bring the humanity back into banking. Companies must ask themselves, what do we do to serve humanity? Do we create joy? Do we create belonging? Do we enable exploration or connection? So I challenge that with all of us here today. Are you making a meaningful connection every day with at least one person? Not having a superficial pleasantry kind of conversation, but something really deep. So I want to talk to you about this guy. But what we do know, first of all, about purpose-driven companies is that it obviously informs your culture. And the kind of culture that you have is a direct result of your purpose. If your purpose is to make money, that will result in one kind of culture. If your purpose is to help people, that will result in another. But I want to tell you the story of Micah Bartlett. That's the man sitting up there on the screen. He is president and CEO of Town & Country Bank in Springfield, Illinois, which is the state capital about 4 hours south of Chicago. And I've known Micah for a lot of years. He's worked at many banks in the Chicago area. So he calls me up about 10 years ago now, and he said, I've taken over this CEO role in Springfield. And for everybody outside of Chicago, you know, they view Chicago as the enemy, and Chicagoans view that everything outside of that part of the state is the enemy. Anyway, so he took over this family-owned bank. He's the outsider from the north coming into the central part of the state, and he wants to make some changes. It's a third-generation family-owned bank steeped in, you've heard this before, we've always done it that way. So he said, you know what? We have something unique here in terms of what we offer. And he said, but we need to clarify how we bring that to the market. We need to clarify who we are. And their basic principle was this, is that money should be a source of empowerment and not anxiety. Money should be a source of empowerment and not anxiety. That purpose guides everything that they do. It guides their training, it guides their product development, it guides how they staff and how they hire and all of that. But taking this kind of bold concept into a smaller Midwest state capital town by a family-owned bank with half the bank has been employed there more than 30 years, you kind of got this. It's not my job. And so Micah said, you know what? You know what's coming. He said, this meant change. And what happens when change occurs? We get the people who resist it. We get the people who take the wait-and-see approach, and then we identify the champions. And what Micah did, and what brought this to life, is he identified the champions within that bank, 6 or 8 people that said, yes, let's bring this to every part of our organization because we firmly believe that money should be a source of empowerment. That aspirational idea is what has brought customers to them. That aspirational idea is what has made customers feel connected to them. And that aspirational idea has been the key to their being able to attract and retain great talent. So, purpose is a big issue, but it doesn't need to be overly complicated. So having a clear purpose, first of all, it's not rocket science. It's not a gimmick. It's why are we here to do what we do. It should align with the needs and demands of your marketplace. And you might be saying, I have no idea what our purpose is. And you're talking about the first tenet. I can't even get out of that one. What am I going to do? Don't overcomplicate this. I want you to buy a brown bag lunch for 10 of your colleagues a week from Wednesday or whatever day you pick. Reserve the conference room. I realize reserve the conference room. I heard from the gal yesterday that's not a good idea, but it's not good for collaboration. But get them in the conference room. Brown bag lunch, whiteboards, roll up your sleeves, and ask them one question. At the end of the day, what difference are we trying to make in the world? And I want you to write down everything that comes up. Everything that comes out of people's mouth. I don't want you to judge it. I don't want you to edit it out. I don't want you to say, no, we could never do that. We'd never get approval for that or whatever. And instead, look at all the responses that have anything to do with making money and strike those out of the equation. Now, what does a process like this do? It gets people thinking about why we're here. You know, Simon Sinek, the great TED Talk guy himself, has said, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And once you're clear on that, you will find the kind of talent that you need. Once you're clear on that, certain kinds of customers will resonate with you, and they'll feel like, wow, this bank really gets who I am, and they value what I value, and that's an important thing. And finally, it's your North Star. It should guide everything that you do. So, as I mentioned, don't overcomplicate this. Take that one idea, take that one exercise, And in so doing, you get to engage everyone that's in that room who might have a very different job than you, and you start getting everybody thinking about what's our purpose. This is the way that you start to unite a culture. And it takes a strong culture, obviously, to really connect with people. Now, tenet number 2, empathy. Empathy is something that I wish the banker that had approached my friend Tom's mom had had a little more of. And I know many of you in this room. I've met you, I've worked with some of you, and I know that you guys have hearts as big of gold and you want to do the right thing all the time. But empathy, here expressed in both the physical channel and the digital channels, does indeed lead to greater emotional connection. Now, empathy, like any skill, when it's new, you've got to practice it, right? And how do you practice it? How do you bring empathy to life? What about the 5 senses of seeing what it's like to be Tom's mom, or feeling what it's like, the humiliation and embarrassment she must have felt because she could not see the computer screen to be able to fill out the online forms that this banker was asking her to do. So every bit along the way, when we get into the senses. Now, in terms of empathy, before we get started talking about it, I want to ask you one question. I want you to close your eyes for a minute, and I want you to think about, if you could make your customers feel one thing, what would it be? Okay. Now, neuroscience tells us that we make purchasing decisions. We make a lot of our decisions, most of them, as a matter of fact, from the emotional side of our brain. But what this stat also reminds us is that emotionally connected customers are 6 times more valuable than just your average garden variety highly satisfied customer. And I know you're thinking, I'll take the highly satisfied customer. That's really good for us, but we got to keep going. But look at some of these metrics in a survey of 60,000 retail customers that were surveyed, and you find some really startling stats. Look at this one. With the account attrition rate, 9% for a satisfied customer, 2% for an emotionally connected customer. Bottom line, lifetime customer value over $10,000 for a highly satisfied customer, and I know that's a pretty impressive number there, and almost $60,000 for emotionally connected customer. So not only do we make decisions for how we buy based on the emotional side of our brain, we know that emotionally connected customers are more profitable to you. So I ask you, are you bringing the emotional component into your marketing and your messaging and the video content that you're creating and the imagery or the stock photos that you purchase for something? Are you thinking about that component, because this is going to be a key driver of profit and success going forward? And by the way, this is going to help you address the naysayers at your C-suite that said, you're talking about what? Touchy-feely emotional stuff? And you can say, 60,000 retail customers wouldn't lie. But here's a practical example. So remember when Atlanta had the power outage? I'm not sure if that ended up being because of a hack or whatever, but remember Atlanta had the big power outage a couple months ago? So the CEO of BB&T got up there and made a video and said, look, we're really sorry. We realize this is wreaking havoc on your life. We've got all the resources to bear at this, and we're going to make this thing, we're going to fix this thing and get it resolved. But I think it shows a lot of guts to get up there and do this and just connect with customers, recognizing how frustrated that they were. Now, many of you have seen some of the content, the great things that TD Bank is doing relative to thanking their customers, the automated thanking machines. As a matter of fact, when I was here 2 years ago speaking about guerrilla marketing, I showed you one of those videos. And I'm going to show you another one. This one's a little longer. It's about 3 minutes, but I'm hoping you'll bear with me. And what I want you to think about in here is just how well TD Bank knew the customers that were portrayed in this video. And just how well they knew that this knowing the customer and understanding them was a bridge to empathy. And that bridge to empathy is what made the relationships stickier. Take a look.
Good to see you. You look awesome. Hello, hello.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, no problem.
So you're a family of 4 now.
Yeah, so we just had another child a couple weeks ago.
Back 27 years ago, when we first started our lives here in this country,
my husband and I are mentoring our 18-year-old granddaughter, and we're very proud of her.
Oh my God, what did you do?
Dear Dad, you came to this country with nothing but a dream. You worked so hard to provide us with a life here. You are a real hero. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. Love, Alexandra.
Dear Nana, you were there for me when no one else was. You are the reason I am who I am today. I love you, Alexis.
It's not just your friends and family whose lives you touch, but somehow everyone around you. You are truly the most exceptional woman I know.
After spending 20 years together in Florida, you brought your life to a new city so that I could pursue my dreams.
We can only try to be as amazing as you. I love you and thank you so much. Love of my life.
Hi, Dad.
Nana.
This is the story of my life?
Like, this is crazy.
I love it. You knew all about this? Yeah.
Jane, what's going on? This is so special.
It really is.
Thank you so much.
Anna, thank you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you very much. I do love my family and my friends, and I feel very blessed and very happy. I have a lot to be thankful for in this world. I really, really do.
Human connection is the single most important thing you can do to differentiate your financial institution. So if you don't do it now, when? So how do we cultivate empathy? As Daniel Pink said, you know, empathy is not sympathy. It's not feeling sorry for someone, but it's really, again, to be inside their shoes, to really know your customers so well. And I know that you all have stories of customers, and you know their life story, and sometimes they're dying to tell you about it. So what's the first thing you can do? Be curious. A lot of our sales training, and importantly so, is about using passive listening skills to making sure that we're listening and repeating back what people hear. But active listening is really, again, imagining what that person is feeling and sensing and what Tom's mom felt about when she was in there not knowing how to fill out the computer screen and the banker being impatient with her, and that story has been told over and over again, and her son calls me. So being curious is about, again, knowing someone's life story. Because when you know where someone is on their life journey, it's going to be very difficult to treat them as a number. Number 2, share a story. You know, data is story with a soul. And First Reliance Bank out of South Carolina, I don't know if they're here. They've been around less than 20 years, but they're obviously doing something right, because in the less than 20 years they've been in business, More often than not, they've been voted as one of South Carolina's best places to work, time and time again. But sharing a story is about, again, getting people to talk. And what they've done at this institution is share the story of this institution through the eyes of the employees as written in their culture book. But again, sometimes it's about at your weekly meeting, as an example, learning to listen to one another at the bank and hearing about their day, hearing about what they have a challenge with. And the next time someone comes up to you and asks, how are you doing? And you will automatically say, I'm doing great. Maybe you're not doing great. Maybe you're not doing great at all, and you need the help of your coworkers. So what I'm suggesting that you do is you learn to be good storytellers by being authentic with each other at the bank or the credit union, and then you can roll that out to your clients. And help others. I would guess out of all three of these that helping others is probably something the majority of you in this room are very good at. But establishing a culture of volunteerism, we do know for a fact that happy people, or people that volunteer, are simply happier, and organizations that volunteer and put back in the community are simply more successful. So cultivating empathy, there's some practical things you can do. You can be curious. You can practice active listening. You can share a story. Now, there's a bank in Russia, and they have used a Samsung virtual reality headset to allow their young personal bankers to get inside what it would be like to be a 75-year-old customer. A 75-year-old customer that through the use of these headsets, they can see through the eyes of a 75-year-old. They can hear through the ears of a 75-year-old. They can feel what it's like to not be able to see very well as you're navigating your way through a computer screen, or at a branch, or managing a customer contact call, whatever the case may be. But what they've done is they've used it as a way to help cultivate empathy on the part of their bankers. And the surprising byproduct of it is that these young bankers have said that they are getting along even greater with their family members who happen to be older. Now, this is one example, and I've tied it back to Tom's mom, but this is something where technology can be used to deepen the human connection, because in this case, it's teaching people what it's like to be in that customer's shoes. Now, we also know, before we move on from empathy, is that shame disrupts connection. Susie Orman, the money expert, she says, I think it's, shame and embarrassment, and she has several key emotions around the idea of money, but shame is one of those. So ask yourself, are customers not calling you or asking for your help or reaching out to you because they're too embarrassed of their financial situation, or they don't like what their credit score is, or they have a financial challenge with refinancing their mortgage and they are too embarrassed to come to you? I read a stat that something like more than 15% of customers will not reach out to their banker because they feel ashamed to do so. So, one of the things that we can do, we know as bankers that we're good at assessing operational characteristics at an institution. So I invite you to go through your processes at your credit union or at your bank and say, where are we producing shame here? Where is this a shame-producing experience? So you've got all the other things figured out. You've got the operational efficiencies figured out. But how is this causing shame with our customer contact staff? Or excuse me, with our customers. So shame can be a really big impediment. Now, there is a video here. I'm not going to play this one. But ING has done some great work around the idea that money can be also a source of conflict. So this is actually about a 4-minute video from the Netherlands, and it's subtitled, but I would encourage you to look at it at some point. Because what it talks about is the idea of how they took customers who, in pairs, who had previously had a close relationship with each other, but somewhere along the way, there was a falling out around money. And what happened then is that drove a wedge into them, in between their relationship. They grew apart. So what ING did is they invited both parts of that duo, and several of them, into the bank, into a private room like this, where she's on one side, and on the other side of the wall is the other half of the duo that she's having a money conflict with. And they both got to share on video camera their side of the story, their perspective on what it meant. And then, at the end of that, then they got to share the videos with each other and watch them. And the bank simply asked, you know, what's more important, your friend and family or your money? So I think that is a really bold move to, again, for an institution that's trying to, again, with their brand position, empower people to keep moving forward. So they understand that money, you know, as a psychotherapist, which I am, and what I learned when I was practicing is that the big things that people fight about are money. Would you like to guess what the other one is? But we can't talk about that here. Anyway, understanding that money is a very emotionally charged concept. It can drive people apart. It can make them feel ashamed. It can make them not feel comfortable talking to you about a critical issue that you are so uniquely qualified to help with. And you don't need to be a psychotherapist. You are already good listeners. You're compassionate people. You love what you do, or you wouldn't be here. So I invite you to take a look at that. Empathy is the most important way for us to satisfy our customers. Technology is not going to replace the power of human connectivity, says the CEO of Barclays. So it's a whole new ballgame. Now, let's talk about the face-to-face relationship. And I think this slide has a different image than the one that is on the mobile app, from what I'm hearing. But I want to talk to you about this idea of the face-to-face relationship because, you know, we're not here to talk about a branch of the future presentation. You have plenty of people here to talk to about that. But we do know that we need to make new opportunities for people to connect with each other when they do come in. And these new opportunities for both your employees and your customers. So I want to tell you the story of this Capital One Cafe. Now, I live in Seattle, and there is a new Capital One store, and it is not this one, by the way, but this had a better image than the photos that I took. But so near the Amazon headquarters in downtown Seattle in the South Lake Union neighborhood, they opened up this new cafe. And the South Lake Union neighborhood is rapidly growing with jobs and new apartments and things like that. So I decided to, after the initial 1 month of hubbub wore off, I decided to go in and check this place out. So last Valentine's Day on February 14th, I go into a bank branch to check out a branch. And somebody tells me, Joe, you really need to get a life. You know, you're going into a bank branch on Valentine's Day. But anyway, what I liked about it is that I walked up to one of these round tables, but it was bigger, and there was a woman sitting at this round table. And across the table, there were a bunch of cards with single words on them. It was like a game. And she said, I want you to pick 3 of the cards whose words most represent where you want your financial life to be in 5 years. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I kind of like that. So I played along, and I grabbed 3 cards, and then we sat down, and she starts talking to me about the financial education and the financial coaching and so forth, because what this bank is positioning around is basically a whole new experience in banking. I'm not remembering their exact tagline, but what they're trying to do, they're reimagining banking. And so through a conversation that was done in the way of a game, I had a non-threatening conversation about what some goals were that I had and where I wanted to see my life in 5 years. And that was happening inside the bricks and mortar, along with a space, of course, that was tellerless and cashless and had the right technology and had a Pete's Coffee Bar and all of that. But it was a different way to use the space, a different way to define the face-to-face connection. And for me, it worked. I thought it was really interesting. And by the way, the financial coaching and education is entirely free because it ties back to their mission of wanting to reimagine the entire banking process. And they're putting this in a neighborhood that is high growth, high density, young, upperly mobile, educated people, and so forth. And the place was literally packed with people. So it's not about whether you have a universal banker or not. That's obviously part of it. But how are you going to make customers feel, and how are you engaging them and what are you going to do to create new avenues to connect with them? Now, we also know that just having video conferencing, which might be a step in the right direction for many of you, is a step in the right direction, but video conferencing is obviously pretty rudimentary. So Cornerstone did a survey in fourth quarter of last year, and they wanted to get a sense from community-based institutions, credit unions and banks alike, where they are on the journey in terms of investing in robotic process automation and machine learning and chatbots and blockchain and artificial intelligence. And you can see these graphs. What's in blue said, it's not even on our radar. In red says, yep, we've talked about it, and that was kind of it. And then gray, we've actually have it budgeted for 2018. And yellow, it's not even on the radar. So what the article that summarized this research said is, okay, if 2018 is the year of chatbots and machine learning and artificial intelligence, somebody forgot to tell community banks and credit unions to join the party because the conversation is almost non-existent. So we always have to be balancing out the human connection with the necessary technologies, and there's a lot of piles that you got to move forward at the same time, I recognize. Now, I'm going to go across the street from that cafe that I just showed you and talk about Umpqua Bank for a minute. Now, back in Seattle, but what this did in the South Lake Union neighborhood, a neighborhood that is growing so fast that it can barely define itself before it morphs into something else. So what Umpqua Bank did is they put a wall inside this branch called the conversation wall, and with one key purpose, that was to be a temporary installation to get an idea of what is most important to the people in the neighborhood, period. So there are all kinds of things you can use your bricks and mortar for to reinvent, to think about what face-to-face connection means and what is it that customers really need from you. Now, what I like even better is the BFF, the best financial friend. Who's heard of it? Okay, so this is where we're headed. We're already here. Imagine this, that I can go to a mobile app, I can download my BFF, and I can handpick the banker that I want by going through the profiles, and in the screen here I can choose from Kim or Spencer or Diane, and I can read a little bit about them, and I can read where they're from and what they like to do in their free time and how they're educated. But what I like about it is that I quite literally have a banker in my pocket. I have the mobile app, and I can do anything on that. I can open up accounts, I can do all the things traditional mobile banking does, but I have a banker that's dedicated to me instead of calling up a 1-800 number and praying I get somebody that I don't have to repeat the story to. Now, obviously, if I pick Kim or Spencer or Diane, they're not available 24 hours a day, even though the app is, for me, artificial intelligence will be taking care of some of the more rudimentary requests and so forth. But for me as a customer, it makes me feel like I'm special. It makes me feel like I have a dedicated banker and I have a go-to person. If I have a problem, I have an opportunity to buy a piece of real estate, I can work with Kim or Spencer or whoever it is that I pick. So are you investing in the kind of technology that not only will make your customers' lives easier, but allow you to connect with them on a face-to-face basis, via chat, via video, however you want to do it? Kim or Spencer or Dave are at your disposal. I think that is a really great thing. Now, Umpqua Bank also announced that they're closing a bunch of stores, like 30% of them by the year 2020. And you might say that's a bad thing. No, that is a good thing because they have spent the last 10 years investing in the kind of technological infrastructure and social media presence to make that an inevitable thing that they would need fewer stores because there's the store. But they're also establishing connection. So, what do we do with all this? I want you to now, we're going to chart out 3 action items for you. The first, and these are more or less a summary of some things I've mentioned to you. Number 1, state and integrate your purpose. And again, if you are unclear as to what your purpose is, then do the whiteboard exercise with the brown bag lunch. Invite people, set a date, yet this month in May. Don't wait till after Memorial Day. Do it now. Pick a date, invite 10 people, it doesn't matter who, you don't need to be perfect about it, and Ask the question at the end of the day, what difference are we trying to make in the world? And see the answers that result. The process is almost as important as the product here because you're involving people and getting them to think on a deeper level about the bank or the credit union. So that's your first action step. Your second action step is evaluate your empathy quotient across your entire journey. Now, what I did not really talk about earlier in that is that your empathy quotient is a way to really evaluate where you are on the customer journey from the time you meet them till the time they leave. But if you want to pick certain points, like opening up a new account on the mobile app, or calling into the phone center for a problem, or how to make an online bill payment and set it up for the first time, or coming into a branch, take any one of those points, preferably all of them, and using what's called a Likert scale, a scale of 1 to 10, or 1 to 5, it doesn't matter. I want you to do a self-assessment of how you are at expressing empathy in that channel, in that moment, in that portion of the customer journey. Now, I realize that this can be a big undertaking. So if that is too much to take on, then I'll make a deal with you. Start here. Go through and identify those shame-producing experiences in your overall delivery. Yeah, we mortify people. We talk about, hey, you bounced your check as they're standing at a drive-thru or whatever the case may be. But the whole point of an empathy quotient is to make your team aware that there are things that we should be measuring that we didn't even know that we should measure. And these are the things that will drive profit, and these are the things that could potentially lead to a profit 6 times greater than just your happy, satisfied customer. So you can do it 2 ways. 3, create one new forum for connected conversation, and it really has 2 parts. One of them is creating a forum for employees to talk to each other in honest, open, radically transparent dialogue. How are you doing today? I need to solve this issue with client X and this mortgage. But being really authentic with each other. And the same thing, creating avenues for your customers to talk. You know, think about the American Express Open all those years ago when that got started. It was an avenue, a venue for people to talk with each other. Connected conversation. Now, even in today's seemingly impersonal digital age, human connection is still a powerful currency. Before we leave here, we've got about a minute. I know that it would be really easy to go outside here and jump back right into our phone and dig into our social media and see what kind of emails and see who liked our Twitter posts and whatever the case may be, and that's all great. But instead, I invite you to get much more personal. You have 1,700 friends and coworkers and colleagues all here to support you, to learn from you to teach them, and you to learn from them. So I invite you and challenge you to have at least one real, deep, connected conversation with one person before you leave this conference tomorrow. So I think we have about 1 minute left if anybody has any questions. All right. So remember, as you leave here, don't jump right onto your phone right away. Go out and have a conversation with another person and make a human connection.